Hello everyone, welcome to VLGA Connect, sponsored by Hunt and Hunt Lawyers. I'm Chris Eddy. It's great to be back with you this week for another of our weekly episodes, bringing you the latest news from across the sector in Victoria and special guests dropping by to catch up today. We'll meet the new CEO of Strathbogie Shire Council, Rachelle Quatrocchi. Rachelle is joining me very shortly. And later in the show, Tony Raunic from Hunt and Hunt Lawyers is here. We'll catch up on some recent legal issues, including significant local law decision made by Casey Council this week, and a couple of new legal reforms dealing with perceived invasions of privacy. More on that coming up later in the episode. But first, let's catch up on some of the latest happenings in Connect News. Discontent over the state government's new Emergency Services Volunteer Fund levy is growing as rates notices begin landing in mailboxes. In the southwest of the state, the Alliance there says the nasty and unfair levy means many ratepayers will see significant increases in their bill with little clarity on how the additional revenue will be spent. Brimbank Council estimates the levy will cost its ratepayers more than $12 million. Mayor Tai Dang has raised concerns, saying the levy places a significant financial strain on ratepayers already struggling to meet their obligations. At Yarra, the council has reaffirmed its opposition to the levy at its August meeting, tabling figures that estimate its ratepayers will contribute $14.6 million. $9 million of that coming from local businesses. And the Mayor of Banyule, Councillor Elizabeth Neely, has published an open letter to the Treasurer and other MPs expressing concerns about the unfair financial pressure on households from the levy and calling for a range of additional assistance measures. In other news, Mornington Peninsula Shire Council has this week announced a major organisational restructure aimed at improving customer service and ensuring long-term financial sustainability. The restructure plan includes reducing employee expenses by $5 million and achieving $5 million in service efficiencies. It will streamline the leadership structure and result in up to 48 redundancies. Redeployment opportunities have been identified for many of the affected staff members. Casey Council has unanimously voted to overhaul its local laws regarding recreational and unregistered vehicles on private property, scrapping costly permits after significant resident backlash earlier this year. The revised laws would allow residents to ride recreational vehicles during specified hours without permits and keep any number of unregistered vehicles on their property under certain conditions. Tony Raunic will be here to unpack that decision a little later in this episode. Some movements at the councillor level in recent weeks. Nominations are open for a by-election at Wodonga in the Lake Hume ward following the resignation of Hannah Seymour in late June. Nominations close next Tuesday. Ballot packs go out from mid-September. Close of voting is Friday, the 3rd of October. By-elections in Darebin and Whittlesea have resulted in the election of new councillors to those councils. In Darebin, Angela Villela was successful from a field of 7 candidates. She replaces Gaetano Greco, who sadly passed away earlier this year. At Whittlesea, the Layla ward result from the last election was voided by VCAT, leading to a new poll, which has seen the election of Michael Labrador to the council. Former councillor Stephen Kosmeski was unsuccessful in regaining the position after distribution of preferences, despite having the highest proportion of first preference votes. Macedon Ranges Council is in mourning with the sudden passing of South Ward councillor Christine Walker, who served since November 2023 and was re-elected for a 4-year term last October. Fellow councillors and staff have expressed deep shock at her loss, remembering her warmth, humour and community-driven approach to her role. A countback election will be held on the morning of the 1st of September to fill the vacancy on the council. And in senior executive news, Bull Oak Shire Council has appointed Daniel McLaughlin as its interim Chief Executive Officer, starting the 1st of September. That's following the announcement of Wayne O'Toole's departure. Mr McLaughlin, a local resident with extensive experience at the council, including leading flood recovery efforts, will serve for up to 12 weeks until a permanent CEO is appointed. And Golden Plains Shire Council's new CEO, Adam McSwain, takes up the role on Monday. He's moving from Hume City, where he was Director of Infrastructure and Assets. He's a former General Manager of Edward River Council across the border in New South Wales. That's your Connect headline news for this week on VLGA Connect. Catching up today with another of the new CEOs around the sector in Victoria. In the chair at Strathbogie Shire Council is Rachelle Quatrocchi. Took up the role a little earlier this year, and Rachelle joins me now for a chat. Hello, welcome to VLGA Connect.
Hi, Chris. Lovely to be here and lovely to see you.
Good to meet you. Congratulations on the appointment. A couple of months at least under the belt now.
Yeah, 2 months under the desk, so going on for three.
And what are your early reflections and observations about taking on a CEO role?
Eyes wide open, Chris, and knowing and doing my homework and coming to Strathbogie, new council, new CEO, new executive, new council term. So very
Yeah,
exciting to be here.
yeah.
And also a lifestyle choice as well as career, professional career goal of mine, moving back to country Victoria. So that's been a really good thing to do as well. And I can tell you the sunsets on the way home at night and sunrises are just spectacular. So
Fabulous. Yeah.
quite a bit different to metropolitan Melbourne.
Indeed. Well, I do know that part of the world very well, and I know you've got some family connections there as well. So it must be a great point in your career to be able to recognise that and take on a role like this.
Absolutely, Chris. And it's probably when I saw that Julie had actually resigned some time ago, Julie Solomon, who was one of the CEOs here previously. I was looking from afar and waiting for the opportunity to arise. So I took the plunge and here we are. So I've moved up to Avenel actually, which is a charming little country town between the Gambia and Euroa.
Yeah. So let's have a bit of a look at your career firstly, your career path, because I noticed that you spent quite a bit of time in South Australia, but you originally experienced local government in Melbourne.
That's right. So studied in Melbourne and during my undergrad took up a position at Melbourne City Council, which I never thought I'd end up in local government, but
Yeah.
absolutely loved that experience. I actually worked at a time when Rob Thomas was there doing all the urban design work, so that was really lovely to be under his guidance and mentorship. Moved over to Adelaide for a sea change. It was going to be 3 years and ended up being 14.
Wow. Yeah.
And also had a really diverse career in local government in South Australia, working for Port Adelaide Enfield. Huge amount of renewal activity going on there, housing development, infrastructure works. So got into some really interesting projects. Submarine Corp was happening at the time, so a lot of infrastructure building around there. Worked on marina development, some big drainage infrastructure road projects, exciting stuff. And then worked for City of Adelaide at a time when Adelaide Oval was being built. So worked on some of that project as well, and Rundle Mall and
Yeah.
Aquatic Centre and other things in between. So it was
Yeah.
exciting time in Adelaide.
Looking at your career path, it did strike me the engineering, the infrastructure, the works flavour that you've had all the way. Do you feel like a trailblazer for a female executive in local government? Because you must have been one of few back then.
Yeah, at a time, definitely, Chris. And
Yeah,
I'd say I've done my hard yards, but absolutely loved it.
yeah,
It's now about giving back to others, and particularly young women in the field as well, that I still mentor today. So I want to support others in their career journey. So
great.
absolutely.
At what point did you decide that a council CEO job was beckoning for you?
So we're moving back to Melbourne probably 14 years ago, and well, actually before that, Bendigo. Then that's when I started taking on leadership roles and probably went from a leadership role to another leadership role and in Melbourne eventually, and worked as an executive for a period of time as well. Had a lot of opportunities to step up into the executive roles, which I absolutely loved, and just felt really energised in those
Yeah,
roles. Thought I could give a lot more, not just from my technical knowledge and experience, but more from my leadership ability, capability, and yeah, it's an area I really am energised by and thrive
yeah.
with.
Terrific. So flash forward to now, you're in the CEO chair at Strathbogie. I assume you were well aware that there'd been some issues at that council, there'd been monitors in place. You've had a fairly major change, I think, in the composition of the council this time around. How much of that played into your to the appeal or otherwise of actually taking on the role?
Absolutely, Chris. I did my homework before coming up here, and it was a lifestyle choice to move back here, but also career-wise. Wanted to make sure I checked out the council group, and I was excited to see a return of one councillor and 6 new that really wanted to make a difference in the community on the back of what's happened here. And that's something that I thought was quite inspiring. Actually, I'd love to work alongside these people and make things happen. I think the community, for a long period of time as well, had lack of guidance, leadership around what's happening at a local government level. So I felt that's something that I could offer, and also for the organisation to bring in some stability and also create an organisation where there's real calm and connection. And I felt I had a lot to give. So yes, I did do my homework, and I was very eyes wide open walking in. But also my strong infrastructure background and knowing they needed quite a bit of uplift in that area. I thought I had a lot to give as well.
Yeah. Is your sense that that period of administration, for want of a better word, has left the organisation better placed now for the challenges ahead?
Yes, and I do. We just had our community satisfaction survey actually, Chris, and it's 10 points up in some areas, which is incredible.
That's significant, yeah.
And we had a long way to bounce back from. And I think that's credit to the council group actually, in their leadership that they've shown. And I've probably been the icing on the cake coming in and getting some things done on the ground as well and getting things happening, but also creating that stability within the organisation. Landing the council plan, key strategy documents, budget and long-term financial plan in June too was significant.
Yeah.
Milestone for the council group as well as the exec and the organisation.
So, Rachelle, what are the current issues that are exercising your mind the most? As a small rural council, I know it's tough. Financial sustainability is always going to be at the top of the list, isn't it?
Absolutely, Chris. And I say some of the key challenges are probably the area, that we manage. So it's 3,300 kilometres. We've only got 130 staff. And a lot of the work that we do is in-house. We're really reliant also on grant funding predominantly in our forward planning and budgets as well. And it's taking the time out to put in for those grant fund opportunities, as well as just getting on and delivering services. So there's a real balance there, and also a gap within that funding model for smaller shires. That was a real challenge. We also are an area of growth, so a lot of people wanting to move into the area for the industry that's here. What's significant is that agriculture sector that brings in a lot of job and opportunities, but there's not the housing here or infrastructure of services to support. So that is also a huge challenge for us. Something you may not know about the area is the wine industry. A lot of people know about the horsebred industry, the thoroughbred industry, and breeding studs that are quite prominent, like Lindsay Park, etc. And there might have been a few Melbourne Cup winners along the way.
Well, it's black caviar country, isn't it?
Absolutely. But what's also very unique is our ranges, so Strathbogie and Ruffy, really beautiful areas. And there's opportunities around ecotourism and also a lot of boutique type of wineries and offerings from the farm gate that are opening up. So we are open for business and we want people to come here and live and work. But that does come with some challenges, making sure that we have a longer term plan, particularly on financial sustainability.
Yeah, and you mentioned in passing housing. Every council has this issue with providing enough housing, particularly if you're trying to manage growth and you've got those developments that are going to bring more people. How are you focusing on that particular issue at the moment?
We're leading some really key strategy and pieces of work. So we've got an urban growth strategy that's actually out for consultation at the moment, and that's been really well received, together with economic development strategy. And we're also doing a lot in the advocacy space as well. So those three are really key, and engaging with our community. One thing that's really exciting that's happening in town in Euroa too is that we've got a railway precinct project that's happening. So Inland Rail, working on behalf of federal government, is actually upgrading all the freight corridor. So that's going to be really exciting as well going forward. providing that transportation along the railway corridor. But also means in the town, and if you haven't been to Euroa, there's a bridge in the middle of town. It's a bit like the Berlin Wall, and that's coming down. So
Is it? Right.
yes, so
Okay.
that's going to open up the whole area, and I think it's really exciting for the township, and will be quite life-changing, I think.
Well, that will literally change the face of the town, won't it?
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So it'll be a connection and place for people, I think, who come into the town as well and visit us, but also the people here. It is literally bringing the wall down between the two areas of the town, so that's quite exciting.
That is really interesting. I didn't know that until you've told us that today. So you've talked about advocacy a bit. You know, every council CEO's got advocacy in their key performance objectives. Yeah. Given that you're all trying to achieve the same thing and get more support out of other levels of government, how are you going to do it differently, I guess, in Strathbogie?
I don't know if I'd say differently, but I'd say together. So I'm going to use that word around regionally as well as locally. So it's about advocating for local needs for the Shire, but also more broadly with the region. The Mayor and I are delegates on the Hume region this year, just out of coincidence. So we're doing a lot of collaborative work across the region with 12 other councils. And some of the key things we're looking at is telecommunication and power outages. But also a lot around roads, road network, and even in the climate space as well, we're looking at some key things. There's also in supporting industry together with Shepparton and Mitchell. I'm actually on a newly formed board, which is one of the incorporated boards that's been set up in regional Victoria, and that's for the Goulburn region. So that's really exciting opportunity as well to put us on the map and advocate for the needs of not only Strathbogie, but within the region. And we've got some projects as well, but predominantly we're focused on some of the bigger items this time around at a regional level, because we've learnt from previous that if we were in this together, then we'll get some better outcomes.
Yeah, terrific. As an organisational leader, the head of the council organisation, what sort of a leader do you describe yourself as?
I'm really focused in on leading with the community and council and the organisation. There has been a real disconnect with that connectivity and community resilience as well over time, as I spoke about, given the changes here at Strathbogie. So I'm really community facing out in the community. And I would say to you, it's almost been daily, Chris, that even across the weekends, I'm really enjoying that part of the role. But it's also making that connection and how we can work together in partnership with our community leaders, and we can make great things happen here at Strathbogie.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, we wish you all the best with that. It's a great part of the world and it's a plum job, Rachelle. Congratulations. And I look forward to hearing about your successes in the years ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Chris.
Lovely to have you on VLGA Connect. That's Rachelle Quatrocchi, the CEO at Strathbogie Shire Council. Right, let's move on to our segment with Tony Raunic from Hunt and Hunt Lawyers. Tony, I'm not sure if you've met Rachel there at Strathbogie, but another fresh new face, I guess, in the CEO ranks in the state, which is great to see.
Yes, I have had the pleasure of meeting and working with Rachel over the years at Manningham Council, I think, where she was previously. And isn't it good? There's a wave of another, can we say another generation coming through at executive level?
Yeah. I think that's right. And of course, there's a few appointments yet to be made. As I mentioned at the start of the show, an interim appointed at Bull Oak this week. The new Golden Plains CEO, Adam McSwain, takes up his role on Monday. So lots of change happening and a few more to come. Right. Tony, how have you been? I haven't seen you for a few weeks. Lots happening around the sector, I have no doubt.
Yes, it's been a constant, Chris. This time of year, plenty going on, and I think a lot of councils too are thinking about, the lead up to, maybe mayoral elections and those sorts of things happening at the end of the year.
Yeah, won't be long. You're right. As we get towards November in particular. One story we wanted to catch up on this week, Tony, is what's happening with that controversial local law out at Casey Council. This got lots of media coverage a few months ago as the new councillors dealt with this piece of local regulation. A lot of people got up in arms about what it was saying about unregistered vehicles and use of recreational vehicles on private property. There's been a big about turn in their thinking on this this week, hasn't there?
Yeah, there has, Chris. So what's happened is after that, that adverse community reaction, and remember in February those 500 odd people showing up at a council meeting, the council decided to firstly have a wholesale external review of the new local law, a bit of benchmarking, comparing the laws against comparable councils, some more consultation. And then on Tuesday of this week at the council meeting, council adopted for public exhibition a revised version of the local law that I think refines some of those provisions, perhaps it clarifies, might be another word, even makes them sort of less, perhaps less, significant of an impact on some of those allotments. So things like the number of unregistered vehicles one can store on a lot under the revised local law introduced in February, need a permit for more than 2 vehicles. Under the new provision, won't need, if it passes, won't need a permit, but there still remains, before we all panic about, lots full of cars in Casey, there are provisions in there that will deal with amenity and making sure that that there's still not an unsightly element. So as Council's Communications and Corporate Governance Manager, Chloe Casey says, if it affects the look or condition of your property, Council may be alerted and step in under the unsightly provisions outlined in the proposed local law. Similarly, one of the other elements that caused a fair bit of angst was this some restrictions around the use of recreational vehicles on lots, Chris. And again, it's been a bit of a walk back in that those vehicles are allowed to be used provided there's a compliance with the EPA guidelines around, the timing of use, after 8 a.m. on a weekday, before 9 p.m. and I think after 9 a.m. on a weekend or a public holiday. So I think a sensible approach. I feel for those councillors. If we think about Casey, no councillors for 5 years, of course, with the fallout with Operation Sandon. They get elected in October last year, take up their role in November there. And then within a matter of a few months, they're having to deal with this pretty, can be a hot potato issue, or a revision to the local law, probably at a time when many of them were getting familiar with council's consultative processes and some of the foibles there. And Chris, I don't know if you in your time on council have seen these scenarios where sometimes you put something out for consultation and virtually nobody puts in a submission.
Many times.
Everyone's happy.
And the danger is you think that that people have read it and they're happy with it, don't you? But it's the reality is often far from that.
Yeah, and I think that's what's occurred here at Casey. And I think Stefan Kuman, the mayor there, said, councillors were taken aback when the local laws were really placed under that spotlight in Feb 25. And since then, there's been this thorough review and consultation. And to quote the mayor, he says, it may not be perfect, but we really captured the concerns of residents. So now the proposed changes to the local law, changes to the law that came in February 25, are out for a public exhibition process. A final decision from the council due in December of this year, when there'll be some feedback in relation to those public submissions. And I think it's been a sensible approach taken by the councillors here. And Chris, I'm not that surprised that in the Casey environment too, there was a lot of angst about the use of private allotments, because Casey's one of those outer suburban areas, lots of low density residential, almost farmland around,
Yeah.
Turin and Clyde, Pearcedale, those sort of places where people have large blocks and they almost assume that they can do what they like on those blocks within a
And many
planning
people
scheme.
probably purchase those lots with the view to being able to do that sort of activity, haven't they?
Yeah, that's right. So I think, we'd expect the councils respond to, the community view, and occasionally, these consultative processes can be misleading. And I think when there's been a sense that the community, there is an overwhelming concern, council appears to have acted, and let's see, let's see, what the community's view is on the revised local law, but one would think that it'd be much more positive.
Yeah, and we should note there's a few other changes in that, and they're outlined
Mm,
on the council's website in some detail. One that caught my eye was the removal of rules around 24-hour timeframes for bins and a ban on hard rubbish fossicking, and instead they've gone with a new law to prevent the dumping of household waste in public bins, which again sounds um, sensible.
yeah,
Challenging issues to deal with in growing areas, aren't they?
yeah, absolutely.
All right, thank you, Tony. That's Casey in the news this week, but for a better reason than the last time this issue was in the news. Now, you've got some news about a couple of legal reforms that are coming in. I think one's in and one's coming, and this is related to how you deal with perceived invasions of privacy. Tony, tell us how this might impact on councillors or in the local government environment.
Yeah. So some recent reforms, and as you say, this is been a significant issue for councillors, council officers over a period of time. So, firstly, at a state level, there's a new civil tort under the Privacy Act, a Victorian piece of legislation. Torts, T-O-R-T, they're
Yeah.
these wrongful acts or infringements of a right that can lead to a claimant suffering loss or harm. And then there's legal liability by the person who commits the tortious act. So this new tort, it's actually just now available under Victorian law, Chris, from the 10th of June. So we have no case law to quote in terms of how it's been interpreted. But this new cause of action, it's available to individuals. So a council couldn't be a plaintiff, but a councillor might be, a council officer might be. And so where someone feels that their privacy has been seriously invaded, they can sue, and they can sue not just an individual, they can sue an organisation. So indeed, a council could actually be a defendant here. And so the examples I'm thinking in a local government context, Chris, might be there's an individual, say, that's been engaging with the council, seeking a planning permit. Maybe it's in relation to a local law or something they want, and they're aggrieved and they're blaming a councillor in particular or a particular council staff member, and maybe they start following them, filming them in their private space, at home, at their workplace, at school, coming out of the gym, etc. Now, this gives a right to take civil action and sue. So there needs to be, the person who's suing needs to have a reasonable expectation of privacy. And Chris, I guess that's about if one was a celebrity actor or singer, say, and you go on the beach in your Speedos or your bikini, it's likely that you're going to end up on social media. Someone's going to film that and look who I saw
Well,
famous on the beach.
would a high-profile local government lawyer fit that category, Tony?
100%.
Okay.
Just like James Bond, absolutely. Just shoot from from the waist up. But a councillor or a council officer indeed wouldn't expect that sort of level of privacy invasion.
No. Yeah.
So potential orders that might be obtained with a tort like this or an action like this: an apology, destruction of the offending material, the footage that was taken, the information that was gathered, and even potentially damages paid by the party that committed the offence. So what I see some real value in this, because in the past, the main avenue for councils, council staff, councillors who feel their privacy's been invaded has been this personal safety intervention order, PSIO. And there are some difficulties with obtaining a PSIO. Firstly, you're asking the court to restrict the freedom of movement or speech of the other individual. So the courts, there's a very high sort of threshold there of burden of proof. But also, I think coming out of often the domestic cases where we've seen PSIOs first used, magistrates are often willing to grant mutual orders. So that means the applicant might achieve an order against the defendant, but they might face a similar order themselves, not to go within the vicinity of that individual. And that can be problematic if you're a council officer trying to perform your role. I'm actually aware of scenarios where I've advised councils where there's been a local laws officer, often in a regional rural area, who at times have had to use firearms to, deal with an animal who might have been hit by a vehicle, and, put down an animal who's seriously injured. If a PSIO is ordered against them, they're not allowed, they've got to hand in their firearms license. So it impacts on their workplace and maybe on their recreation, if that's something they use for their recreation.
So you think this is a more practical way of dealing with those issues?
Yeah, I do. I think it creates another avenue where essentially the redress can be found with both the cessation of the inappropriate action, the destruction maybe of some of the material that has been spread around about the person, and potentially damages where there's monetary damages where there's harm or loss that's been suffered.
Okay.
So I think that's good.
Yeah, so that one came in June. Now I misread. I thought this other one was coming in December, but it actually came in last December. And this is about doxing. I've got to confess, Tony, that's a word I heard a lot before I actually knew what it meant. I'm not sure whether that's the case for others.
Yeah, I feel like I'm being doxed a lot. I get all these documents from people, but doxing is actually cyber harassment. So using a carriageway service, which is, of course, the internet, social media, email, the phone service, etc., to basically spread details about someone, enabling them to be located or contacted,
right?
Spreading private details about them. And so what has occurred at a Commonwealth level, so across Australia, is there's a new criminal offence under the Criminal Code, came in December, as you say, last year, Chris, punishable by up to 6 years imprisonment. So a significant offence. And it's something that, in this case, it's not available to you and I or individuals to sue on. It's not a civil action. It's an offence that the authorities, police, other supervising authorities might want to charge someone with. When it was introduced into the federal parliament, the then Attorney General, Mark Dreyfus, cited as an example the release on social media of the personal details of 600 participants in a particular WhatsApp group that was a pro-Israel WhatsApp group, and their full names and addresses and social media accounts were published. And he said, this is something that we need to have a specific offence for. So again, in a local government context, I can imagine a scenario where there's someone who's aggrieved or politically in opposition to someone who's a councillor, or they're aggrieved with how a council officer has handled something, and they're publishing on social media details of their home address, the council officer's home address, where their children go to school, the councillor's place of work, what's the hair salon they go to, what gym do they use, those sorts of private details, I think amount to doxing. Maybe it's their license, and these sorts of things are published online. So again, it gives people at the receiving end of that sort of behaviour an option to say to police, well, what about this offence as well?
Yeah.
And maybe looking at the criminal tort of serious invasion of privacy and taking action under that also.
Okay, that's really interesting. Good to know about those two recent reforms that have come in for dealing with invasions of privacy, or at least perceived invasions of privacy. Thanks for the review on that, Tony. A couple of stories that caught my eye this week that I might just throw at you for some passing comments before we wrap up. One down on the Mornington Peninsula, where there's been some local press about a vote on the mayor and others going to Canberra on an advocacy trip, I think, and a suggestion that the mayor shouldn't have voted on it because of conflict of interest. I must admit, I'm struggling to see the point of this.
Yeah, that's right. And I think there's been, sometimes that allegation of conflict of interest can be weaponized, and sometimes it's just oversimplified and misunderstood. So in this case, what happened is that on the 12th of August, Mornington Peninsula Shire passed a resolution. I think it was a unanimous resolution, in fact, for the mayor, Anthony Marsh, to participate in a joint advocacy trip to Canberra, where the CEO and the mayor of Mornington would attend, as would representatives from the neighbouring Frankston City Council. Go to Canberra, spend one night, and in Canberra would spend time with the two local federal members, Jodie Ballier, who's the ALP member for Dunkley, and Zoe McKenzie, who's the Liberal member for Flinders. And there's been some questioning in a local community news outlet about was it appropriate for the mayor to vote on the resolution that he joined the joint advocacy trip, and of course that meant that his associated expenses would be picked up by the council. And the argument being, was there a material conflict of interest for the mayor? Did the mayor have a material personal interest in the outcome of the resolution such that he shouldn't have voted? My view, like yours, I think, is that I don't think so. I think we're talking here about what was the best position, how to put council in the strongest position for advocacy. What is the makeup of our representative group that goes on that joint advocacy trip? It wasn't akin to me. I think it's distinguishable from voting on, should we reimburse the mayor for a study leave trip overseas, or a sister city trip, or reimbursement of childcare expenses, or taking leave of absence, etc. I think that the personal interest is much more apparent in those examples. And here we were really talking about, is the council best placed to have its mayor go along to a key advocacy effort in Canberra? We're talking about $900 odd, I think.
Look,
Chris.
it must have been a slow news day, because to me it's a non-story. It's laughable that the suggestion's even been raised, unless there are elements to this that we're not aware of. But as it's been presented, I think we should just move on. And the other one that crossed my desk just this morning was a debate down at Bass Coast, Tony, about the mayoral collarette. Now, the first thing here is I've never heard this word collarette before. I think we used to call it the jewel of office at Hobson's Bay when I was there. And that is this little thing on a chain, a little jewel, metal thing in some cases, that replaced the more valuable and extensive mayoral chains they used to use in previous years.
Yeah. Look, it's, as you say, there's been if you like, a toning down of some of those sort of indications of office, and most often the mayoral chains are in a display cabinet somewhere. We of course had amalgamations, so many of those councils don't have the long history of use of mayoral chains. I think in this case, what we're talking about is something that has a material chain, and at the end of the chain is some a symbol of the council, and it's worn by the mayor on particular formal occasions. I don't believe it's worth significant amounts of money, and I don't think we should be expending significant amounts of money to create these things. But the idea that somehow it is an extravagant use of resources, I think, is ridiculous. I think that it's a token of office, and I believe
that's a better
when
word.
one ceases to be the mayor, it gets handed to the next mayor. It's not as if it ends
Well,
up in
I think
someone's
that was the point of
mantelpiece.
I think that was the point of the discussion. One councillor wanted it enshrined, I think, in the governance rules that it be presented formally, I think, to an incoming mayor. But we have come a long way since the old days when there were mayoral robes and these very expensive chains that always had to be insured and locked in a safe because they're worth a lot of money. Many councils around the state, I'm sure, still have them locked up in a safe somewhere.
Yeah. As I say, that's sort of regalia, and we've seen that change across the community. Believe it or not, I've wigged up before and gone off to court with a wig and gown on, but it's increasingly rare that happens. Only in particular courts, Chris, and we're seeing this across the community, almost like a sense of equalisation for everyone. But I do think that there is some value in some of that ceremony, and having a something simple like that's representative of the Shire or the council. I don't see a problem with that.
I know I've seen the photo. I can't remember. Back in your day as the mayor of Nillumbik Shire, did you wear mayoral chains?
No, there was a set, because Nillumbik was a new creation out of the shires of Eltham and Diamond Valley, etc. So it's there's somewhere the mayoral change for those old municipalities. But yeah, there was something akin to that, but it was much more less substantive than what you're imagining, Chris.
I know. All right. We've probably gone on a bit longer than we normally do, but we've had a bit to catch up on, Tony, and it's always great to chat. Thank you for your insights and for the support from Hunt and Hunt Lawyers for VLGA Connect. And I'm sure we'll catch up again very soon.
Yeah, it's a real pleasure, Chris.
Tony Raunic there from Hunt and Hunt Lawyers. Thanks as always to Tony and the team at Hunt and Hunt Lawyers for their support for VLGA Connect. Thank you to Rachelle Quatrocchi, my guest earlier in the show today from Strathbogie Shire Council. That interview was recorded a few weeks ago. Strathbogie in the news this week as being the latest council to introduce a registration system for attendance at council meetings. You can hear more about that on the latest edition of the Local Government News Roundup podcast, which came out this morning, Friday morning. That's our episode of VLGA Connect for you this week. Thanks very much for tuning in on YouTube or listening to us on podcast. We're sponsored by Hunt and Hunt Lawyers, and we're back with more for you next week on VLGA Connect. Until then, bye for now.